Hello, this is Trum, and here is the game Sailor Moon for arcades. This replay is a high score replay that I did last year in the summer. I think I did this in May of last year, something like that. And I managed to score over 2 million. This was my second time scoring over 2 million, and I reached my, well, basically the goal I was going for, which involved the idea that if I were to get incredibly lucky with the score items, there's a random item you can get that gets you another 30,000 points. If I were to get 4 of those, and I would have 2.1 million with that luck, then I'm happy with the score, no matter what my luck is. So this time I ended up getting 2 such items, which is, well, basically average, or very slightly above average, because I think the true average should be between 1 and 2. And the score I would have had with 4 is 2.1 million, so that's why I decided, after I got this round, well, I'm basically happy now. Sailor Moon is kind of infamous for its difficulty among beat-em-ups, and I'm not a huge beat-em-up expert or anything. I started getting into beat-em-ups a bit more a couple of years ago, and since then this is definitely the one I've played the most by a long shot. I started getting an interest in beat-em-ups to a higher degree about 2 to 3 years ago, and I'd say the beginning of that was kind of there's arcade tournaments where you get a limited time to play a bunch of different games, and a bunch of other people are also playing those games. We're all playing the games. And sometimes in these there's a beat 'em up or two. And the first one I joined was the Olympics in 2019, and in that one we played The Punisher and Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. And I ended up really liking both of those games. I had played both of them before, just not very much. And I ended up especially growing to like Cadillacs and Dinosaurs a lot from that. But I didn't clear either game because, we get basically a month to play like 20 games. There was enough time to clear them if I was, power gaming, trying harder, but, well, I didn't. And then in 2021, early 2021 or late 2020, around that time, there was another tournament, and this one I would say was the one where I really went, well, I need to play beat 'em ups more. Callis Cup Arcade Variety. This one had Zero Team 2000 in it, and Zero Team 2000 is a version of Zero Team that, well, it works in MAME. I believe original Zero Team doesn't work properly in MAME or something like that, or didn't at the time, or there's some kind of problem. Zero Team 2000 ended up being a little harder, and it was quite hard, but I did manage to clear it during that tournament. I spent a lot of time on that, maybe like 15-20 hours of game time for that. It wasn't easy, and during that time I felt this was a whole lot of fun, but there are more fun beat-em-ups, right? There are more fun beat-em-ups. So like after the tournament, I decided, okay, I'm gonna play more beat-em-ups than this. So I started digging for other beat-em-ups. I already knew about Final Fight, about Cadillacs, about the Dungeons and Dragons games, although I'm not a huge fan of those, to be honest. And lots of beat-em-ups, but there's so many of them. I decided to start digging, like what might be a beat 'em up that I really want to play, and not just clear, but like play a bit. play more, I ended up finding this game. And it was kind of love at first sight. I mean, I'd played this game very little before, so I didn't necessarily like find the game just like that. I'd played it a little before, and I think the reason I played this before was because Iconoclast, that's a shmup super player, he was like, Sailor Moon's the best beat 'em up ever. So I tried it out in MAME, and I got completely ass blasted by it. And you know, I thought this game seems fine, but I couldn't really make heads or tails of it. The bosses were kicking my ass. I looked up that you need to, so you can see me playing here, you need to infinite these enemies. This game makes that actually pretty easy to do compared to some other, lots of beat-em-ups allow you to do that. This is one of the ones that makes it easier to do. You don't need autofire to do it. It doesn't really require much on your part to do this. But yeah, I got kind of ass blasted by it back in like, I don't know, 2018 or whenever I tried it. But now, in 2021, things changed. I immediately grasped how to play the game. It was, without a doubt, all of that experience I had playing Cadillacs, Punisher, and clearing Zero Team, playing Final Fight in those tournaments. I started playing this on Fightcade with a friend of mine, Sil, and almost right away we both missed the game together. Because as it turns out, this game is actually very easy in multiplayer co-op mode compared to other beat-em-ups. The game doesn't really add new enemies or change anything, so the game is far easier with 2 players than alone. After we did that, I was like, well, I guess now I better clear the game myself. A couple of days later I did. It was not nearly as hard as I expected it to be, because, you know, I'd heard horror stories about how this game is, you know, it's the hardest beat-em-up ever, complete bullshit. The timer is impossible, the bosses are impossible, everything's impossible. And it turns out that's really not the case. It's a difficult game for sure, but I think there are harder beat-em-ups out there. So that's like my little story. After I cleared the game, I didn't really come back to the game to start score running it for quite some time, but last year I decided, okay, it's time to learn this game for real. Now we're gonna start going for score. So that's what you're seeing here. It's me playing for score. So now that I've given you my little story, let's talk a bit about the game itself. What makes Sailor Moon a good game? What makes it so overrated in difficulty? Why is everyone overrating it in difficulty so much? How do you score in this game? And yeah, everything basically. So first of all, there are 5 characters you can pick between, and I've cleared the game with all the characters. They are reasonably balanced in terms of well, strength. Reasonably balanced, but not. I would say that if you want to clear the game, you should probably pick Jupiter or Venus, if you ask me. You could clear with anyone as your first character, but Jupiter and Venus might just be a little easier to do it with. And specifically for score, I picked Venus for one reason, that where I noticed, okay, like Venus is the character to use, and that's that Venus can do a scoring trick that I believe not all characters can do, and Venus does it with the most ease. I've tried doing that scoring trick with all the characters, and I don't remember the exact results, but I do remember that 2 or 3 couldn't do it. I don't remember if it was 2 or 3, but the other 2 or 3 characters then can. Only Venus could do it with some leeway. So Venus is the best at it, and that's because Venus has the fastest throws. So The score trick involves double throwing enemies. You could see me doing that on the stage 1 boss, and you could also see me doing it during the stage 2 boss on some of the Sako enemies. In order to, I'll explain double throwing next time we see it in the run, because it doesn't actually pop up that often. Now, other than being able to double throw, having fast throws is always useful in a score run, because throws give you the highest number of points between all of the moves we use for scoring. Throws are the best move. The reason you don't see me throwing exclusively is because of the timer. I can't throw everything all the time, because then I will run out of time. That's why I try to use as many throws as I can with the amount of time I have available. And when I'm not throwing, I'm just using the normal combo. And basically any other move should not be used. If you do use them, it is in a sense a score loss, but it can still be used for game flow reasons, other moves, if you must. So, fast throws, yes, that's great. Now, when it comes to the normal combo, on the other hand, basically any character is fine for score. There's... You might think, like, yeah, Venus punches really fast, but I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I do think maybe Venus does not punch the fastest. It is those fast throws, really, that pushes her ahead. So, a normal attack combo lasts up to 5 hits, but you can cancel it at any point. And the reason this game is so good for this punch cancelling is because when you attack an enemy in this game, the enemy is stunned for a very long time. So the game gives you a lot of time to reset your combo at any time and control the enemies. This is a game, I think this is why I believe, this is the main reason why I believe this game is not as hard as other people say it is. This game gives you a lot of control over the enemies. If you know how to control them, you can stun lock the enemies constantly all the time, and you do not need to memorize every enemy spawn or anything like that to clear the game. You do not need that. Of course, I'm playing for score, so I did memorize every enemy spawn for that reason. Normally when you're cancelling your hits, it's usually best to do it on your third hits for speed. 3 hits is good. Here we're double hitting the enemies, and that's also something that Venus is pretty good at. So that's just another reason to use Venus. You can hit enemies to both sides of you and stun lock on both sides. This is good for score. It's risky, but it's good for score because it saves you even more time. Because scoring in this game is, like I mentioned, it's kind of like a speed run. We're fighting against the timer. We're trying to fit in. We're trying to kill all the enemies as quickly as we can to fit in as much time as we can to throw enemies like this, like that. Here, I'm starting the stage 3 boss. At this point, I want to have about as much time as I have here. It's exactly what I want, because I'm going to die. You only get 1 extra life in this game. You start with that extra life, you don't gain any new ones. I'm going to die on purpose on this boss. And before I die on purpose, I want the boss to lose almost half of its health. Because if it loses half of its health, you trigger the next phase. So I don't want it to get down to half of its health just yet. And the reason I want a little bit of health left over is because there's RNG with whether or not the boss stands or flies after it gets up. And if she flies when she gets up, that's better on this second life. However, on your first life, you would like to get to throw her a bunch of times as well, so you can't throw her when she's flying. So there is that. Now, while I'm doing this infinite combo on the boss, I'm going to do that for this full timer, because that's one of the scoring tricks in this game. Let me explain a bit more about the scoring system. So I mentioned that its scoring system is largely a fight against the clock. That's not the end of it. It is a lot worse than that. it's also a fight against the enemies as a group, because in this game you get score per hit. You do not get more score for hitting more enemies all at once, and that kind of flips the beat 'em up meta on its head, because usually in beat 'em ups you do something called grouping. You go, okay, here's a bunch of different enemies. In order to keep the game, keep the whole fight clean and simplify it, you try to get all of the enemies together, and then when you combo all the enemies or you throw one enemy to all the other, they all fall, and you can kind of control them. And if any of the enemies are not grouped, you try to use the mechanics in the game, whatever the game has available, to regroup them, to keep everything simplified. And that's kind of what makes beat 'em ups interesting, is the beat 'em ups will use lots of different types of enemies and combine them in different ways, so that when you fight all these different groups, grouping them is not simple. It has to be challenging. It needs to be interesting and challenging and fun and all those things. Yeah, Sailor Moon for Score kind of flips this on its head, because Sailor Moon for Score is just, okay, you have all these enemies, now you need to somehow find a way to isolate them and fight them one by one. As much as possible, as much as you can. If you throw an enemy into another enemy, you get score for the throw, but all of the enemies take damage, so you're wasting damage. So the enemy's health meters are score resources. So it's a very, very difficult game to play for Score. Very, very difficult. Even if the base game isn't as difficult. However, like I said, the game gives you the tools you need to do all of this. You have tremendous control in this game over the enemies, because of your kit, because of how strong your basic combo is. You have such great stun times on the enemy. Most beat 'em ups do not let you stun the enemies this much. You can just incapacitate anything, which is just amazing. Okay, so now you've learned kind of the core idea behind scoring in Sailor Moon. You spawn the enemies, you try to fight them one by one, and you try to survive doing that. And then you try to do it as fast as you can, so that you can get extra time to use throws, because a throw gets you 1,000 points. A punch gets you 300. That's a big difference. Now, a throw does more damage than a punch, so the meta is use your throw when the enemy is on its last health, if there is time to do it. You don't need to do it on every enemy, because you need to watch your timer to decide how much extra time do you have to do everything you want to do. If you have extra time, you can start throwing the enemies on their last hit. But if you feel like you're on thin ice when it comes to the time, you can finish them off with a punch and move on. And if there's lots of times, you can use one enemy to throw them around over and over, back and forth, back and forth. This game awards you a new timer at certain points that you want to know about. So on this stage, I actually made some mistakes with the timer. This was the one stage where I made uncharacteristic mistakes with the timer. I just kind of forgot. So that did lose me a little bit of score. And the other source of points is a luck thing. So let me explain about that luck thing now. Right now, I'm carrying crystals. There's a crystal right there. I'm gonna pick that up. That crystal just gave me 30,000 points. If you're playing this game for a clear, you're going to want to use your crystals, because they're basically like a bomb, a screen clearing bomb. Having more of them, you do more damage to everything. But if you play for Score, you do not use your crystals, because if you have 5 crystals on hand, that's the max. Every additional crystal you pick up gives you 30,000 points. So this game has lots of enemies that always drop crystals, but it also has enemies that almost always drop food, but there is a small chance those enemies could drop a crystal. And for the longest time, I was wondering, is there a way to manipulate these guys to drop crystals? And I figured probably not, because I was looking at the world record, what the world record was for this game. I don't remember exactly what it is right now, but judging by the number, it was too low for them to be grabbing crystals everywhere. So that didn't seem likely. But what if you could manipulate some enemies to drop crystals, but not all of them? You know, maybe there is something there. Maybe there is some way to manipulate crystals to come out more often. Turns out that you basically can't do shit. Someone looked into the code, Search looked into the code. You can't really... You just have to accept what you get, and the odds of getting a crystal is roughly 1 in 10 from those enemies. And if I remember correctly, there's like 13 food droppers in the game, something like that. Each one of them has roughly 1 in 10 chance of giving you a crystal. So if you're getting like 3 crystals from those guys, that's very good luck. And I was a bit too open to the idea of getting 4. I don't think I ever actually got 4 in all of my runs. 4 bonus crystals. 3 was the most I ever got. Because there is another score run on YouTube that does get 4, and that is pretty insane. So when I watched that, I was like, well, he got 4, maybe I can get that too. No. If you get 2, that's fine. If you get 3, that's amazing. If you get 4, now you're incredibly lucky at that point. So 4 would be a bonus of 120,000 compared to no luck. And here I got a bonus of 60,000. These tennis guys, these particular tennis guys, they come out of the screen to shoot at you, and then they immediately leave. So you can kind of play around with them like this, not let them leave. And that's kind of the strat here, is to get to those guys and use all of the time I have left to throw those guys around. So if I have a little bit more time than necessary, I could use maybe more throws than I did afterwards. And if I have a little less, I would just adapt and use less throws on those particular enemies. This screen is tricky because it's hard to maximize your score on these 3 enemies. But yeah, it's usually hard to maximize your score in this game. So on the next screen, I will start talking a little bit more. I should maybe start talking more about the run itself, but by understanding what I'm saying about the game's mechanics and score system and stuff, you can kind of follow along with what I'm doing in the run without me having to explain it. Here I'm double throwing enemies, so how you accomplish this is you have to keep the enemies separated vertically, and then you have to warp them together using grabs, because when you grab the enemy, you warp the enemy to your position. So if you're slightly above or slightly below the enemy when you grab them, they get warped vertically to your position. So that's how you can gradually warp the enemies together, and if the other enemy does not get up from the ground while you're throwing the enemy that you're grabbing now, you can double throw like this. If a character has slower throws, they can't double throw because the other enemy will get up from the ground, and you will throw one enemy into the other, and then both will fall to the ground, and then the next time they get up, they will both get up from the ground simultaneously. So, important scoring trick that Venus excels at. Oh yeah, slaps during the grab also give you 300 points. And yeah. Here's another thing about throws, like how do you know which enemies to throw? Sometimes it's not so obvious which enemies are best to throw when it comes to like picking them up and throwing them again. Enemies have different wake-up speeds. So when an enemy falls to the ground, how long it takes for the enemy to get back up on its feet is dependent on the enemy type, and some enemies take longer to get up. Those enemies are the ones you would preferably not throw around. But sometimes you might anyways, because, you know, it's not a huge score difference, and perhaps, like in this case, this is the last enemy on this screen. So if I know I have extra time, I may as well use it to throw it extra times, right? Alright, so what about the bosses? In this game, I would say the main flaw in this game that makes this game, you know, not far from a perfect beat 'em up. It's still probably my favorite beat 'em up, but a flaw in this game is the bosses. The bosses are kind of stupid. When this boss gets up, she has a 50% chance to do that one move, or a 50% chance to do nothing, and I'm really fucking up this boss, by the way. This boss is pretty easy, like most of the bosses are pretty easy once you get the hang of them, but I mean, it's hard to explain. I think if you've played this game, you know what I'm talking about. The bosses are really dumb. You can get better at them, but they will never stop being kind of stupid. Alright. So coming up is stage 5. This is one of the more speedrun oriented stages. This is the first stage in the game that has an exceptionally strict timer. So if you're going for a 1cc in this game, this might be the first stage that might feel like a major roadblock to you, because you're like, man, how do I get past this stage fast enough? And then you get to the boss, and the boss on this stage will either require a bomb, or you have to know exactly how to do it, and I guess most people don't really know how to do it. I've never seen a video of someone who really knows how to do that boss. I had to figure it out myself. Okay, so these masked men are relentless. This is the only stage with them, and they are pretty relentless. They just keep sneaking in punches at you, and it's very hard to avoid them. And they like staying away from you and then randomly approaching you, and they can instantly punch you if they feel like it. Oftentimes before you can really do anything to them. So this is one of those stages where it's very hard not to take any hits. It's very, very, very hard. However, on the flip side, these masked men do very little damage per hit. Very little damage per hit. So you don't need to be too worried about them bullshitting you and punching you sometimes. It's okay. I'm getting punched more than usual here, by the way, but it's like I said, it's okay. You don't get more score for having more health. Doesn't matter, as long just don't die. Speaking of the enemies, I mentioned that these guys are kind of relentless with how aggressive they are. So I mentioned that you can stun the enemies for very long periods of time with your punches in this game, which makes you feel really powerful. So on the flip side, the enemies themselves are also very powerful in this game. This is one of the beat-em-ups with some of the toughest enemies in terms of like consistently handling them, like their AI, aggression, smartness. You know, the enemies in this game are smart. They are very difficult to control on paper. It's just because your punch stuns them like this that you really can more easily control them. The enemies themselves are extremely nasty, so I think that's why this game will feel brutally difficult at first. Just at first, before you realize how strong you are. This game will feel brutally difficult because the bosses are bullshit, and because the enemies are extremely aggressive and evasive. They're kind of randomly aggressive and evasive. It's very tough to understand what's going on with the enemies in this game. But as you keep playing the game, you kind of start to get a feel for what's going on with the enemies. They kind of have chase modes and evasion modes, and sometimes you can even see that like you're moving towards the enemy and they're running away from you, and then when you switch directions and you go away from them, then they instantly start chasing you instead. So the more you play this game, trust me, it starts making sense. It does start making sense. Here's some more double hitting, very good technique to be using for score. It's pretty risky though, so you don't like, you need to just play the game to really to start to realize how that's done. Here, we do need some extra time for the boss. There's a lot of moves you can do in this game that you never see me use, because they're just not used for score. Moves that involve jumping and running, for instance. Those moves are very good for survival. Here is one of the only times I use one of those types of moves. And what I'm doing here is that I'm looking at the ground, and I have a landmark at the ground where I know I'm going to jump when I get on that landmark, and then I'm going to do that running jump attack at the peak of my jump, and that will just barely hit one of the enemies as I spawn the boss. Otherwise, if you just run in, you will stop dead in your tracks as the boss spawns, and all of the enemies will scatter around the screen, and it will be impossible. But if you do what I did there, you can send an enemy to the ground, and then you're right next to the enemy, and then you can just kind of punch the enemies, and right after you've punched them a couple of times, 2 times, 3 times, you grab an enemy, throw them into the group, they all fall to the ground, and you just keep repeating that. And sometimes, you know, an enemy might escape. One enemy might like escape, not be in the group. You can play around that. You can play around things on this boss. All right, stage 6. This is a tough one as well. This is a tough one for score, and for survival, it is going to be a scary stage because of the boss. The boss is not consistent for me. Probably not for anyone, honestly. The boss is just kind of bullshit, and you should, no matter if you're scoring in this game or you're working on your first 1cc or what you're doing, there's always a risk you can die to the boss on this stage. Okay, so this level has a lot of the old ladies. I call them Onibabas. I don't know what their canon name is, but that's what I call them. And they are very nasty on this level. They randomly grow horns and start chasing you, and they are very... They're on this particular stage, especially, they're just very anti-score. They don't like being isolated, and they don't like being easily isolated and hit over and over. This stage you need to be very careful with your screen scrolling when you're scoring, because you need to be very exact not to get any extra enemies you don't want to have on screen. That is, of course, a running theme with scoring in Sailor Moon on any stage, but on this stage it is especially important because there's often like one point on the screen where you're spawning some new enemies, and then just a centimeter next to that you're spawning even more enemies. So here, for example, I can't just keep scrolling the screen from here because more enemies will come in. And this is one of the screens I mentioned that's just kind of anti-score. You can't move around because I almost spawn new enemies, those guys there. You can't really move around more to the right. You have to stay on the left side, and the Onibabas can, from off-screen, charge at you. And if they start charging at you from the right, you have to deal with it, which wastes some score, because, like I said, you want to isolate the enemies. These three ninjas, this is one of the only parts of the game where I just go, fuck this sometimes. Depends on how big my health is or how good my pace is. I might just go, fuck this, and punch 2 of them all at once. Because scoring on those 3 ninjas, like, it's a little bit of score, yes. But not any more than any other enemy. The game doesn't discriminate between enemies. It's 300 points per hit, 1000 points per throw. So if you hit 2 ninjas at once, you waste a little bit of score, but you might just save your run. Because fighting those 3 ninjas, optimally, for score, is super fucking risky. Anyway, this stage is a blast. I love this stage. Probably the coolest stage to me, though, is probably stage 3. That stage is kind of a nightmare. It is very difficult, both for survival and for score. I think the fact that they put in such a difficult stage already on stage 3 definitely can cloud your judgment for the difficulty of this game in general. I don't know why they put one of the hardest stages in the game on 3, but they did. And I know I didn't really comment on the first couple of levels, like what I was doing, because I wanted to, you know, explain the game, talk a bit about my experience with the game and all that. But there's some cool shit going on those levels when it comes to score strats. So if you do want to watch that, if you maybe weren't paying full attention, for example, on the stage 1 boss, the score tactic for that is pretty interesting. It's pretty random, but it's pretty interesting. And even at the end of that, you can, if you grab one of the 2 bosses, it has to be one of them. It can't be the other one. I forget which one it was now. They have different colors that I've learned. If you grab the one of the correct color and throw it into the other, you randomly get like 12k bonus score if they both die from that. But again, it has to be just one of them. I don't know why that is, if it's a glitch or what it is, but it's a score trick. It's almost like a Rising-esque score trick. Okay, so here we're at the Nightmare boss. Remember the stage 3 boss? Well, now there's 2 of them. With save states, I spent a lot of time trying to find a reasonable way to actually hit these guys individually, because I figured, well, it's theoretically possible, so maybe that's like some kind of trick that's done at a world record level. But it's just fucking impossible. It just is fucking impossible. I've tried it in so many different ways to make it reasonable. It just kind of isn't. So I don't think that's a tactic that is being done. You could do it in a task though. See, I'm almost dead. Usually this boss goes better than this, but this time I almost fucking died. And at any point in this game, you could kiss your run goodbye, because you need to know miss the whole game. With the suicide, of course, but you know, that's a plan, so you can't ever die on accident. So now that we're done with that stage, now the game gets much easier in terms of survival, but the score tricks keep coming. So this level was actually the worst level in this run, which is a shame, because every other level was very good. Very good indeed, and if this level had also been good, this would have been a very sick run. Very, very sick run. We would have seen the best recorded run in terms of execution if this stage had been good. Because I'm... other than on this stage, there's another run on YouTube that gets 4 bonus crystals that does like, I guess, about 15,000 points more than me in terms of not luck. And if my stage 7 was good, I would have had a better score than that in terms of, you know, not luck. Of course, both runs are roughly about the same. This run and the other run that you can find on YouTube, roughly about the same in terms of scoring, other than the luck. But this is the run that this is the stage that kind of killed the scoring potential of my run. And it's this cat. You need to do an infinite on this cat here, and then one more time after this. And the cat is a little weird. If you try doing this, you might find sometimes that, oh, what happened? The cat broke free. Like, weird things can happen. Like that. And it's very wasteful. I just lost lots of score on this cat. It's very wasteful, and things will only get worse from here. And now my health is low, so I'm actually playing it safe on those tennis guys, going like, okay, my health is low, I need to be a little careful. Because scoring on 2 tennis guys all at once, when you don't have the freedom to scroll the screen, I mean, things can go very, very wrong, because those tennis guys have incredible grab range. They can grab you, and when they do, I mean, you can kiss this run goodbye if one of them would grab me there. That wouldn't be any good. So I decided to play safe on those. And here I'm hoping for crystals to appear, but I'm getting food. And I believe at this point there are no more food enemies from what I remember. So now we're basically out of score luck that can happen. It's over now. We've had 2 random crystals appear and we can't get any more. But yeah, another thing I didn't mention is, so in a lot of beat 'em ups you can end your combos with a throw by like holding down or up. Depends on the game. Sometimes you can do both to throw either forwards or backwards. That's not a thing in this game. You can't end your combos in any way other than to finish them out with a 5th punch. If you want to end your combo with a throw, you have to actually go up and manually grab the enemy. But that's not a problem. In this game, you can easily grab things. When you stun an enemy with your punch, they are stunned for quite a long time. You can just punch them like this and go up to them and grab them. They're still gonna be stunned, and you're good. So it's not a problem. I just thought I should mention that this game doesn't have that mechanic. In this room, you can actually get more points than I did by double punching the cat and one of the mannequins. But I hate doing that because the cat punch hitbox is very stupid. It is very, very stupid, and double punching the cat and a normal enemy becomes very stupid and unreliable as a result. So I'm not a fan of that strat, but it's something you can do to squeeze in a little bit more points. And the cat is still being stupid. Really not a nice, pleasant stage 7 to watch, that's for sure. If the cat does that one more time, you know, I'm fucking dead. It fucking sucks. It's also kind of nerve-wracking, to be honest, to do these full timer infinites. Especially on this level, because you're near the end of the game. Most of the hard stuff is past you. You've got a run on your hands. And it's not trivial to do that. I don't use autofire for that, I do it manually. To do that for so long without slipping up, it's stressful. It really is. It's stressful and it takes time. You need good nerves. Thankfully for me, I have pretty good nerves when it comes to gaming. I don't really have much problems with feeling nervous or stressed or stuff like that. I almost never feel like my gameplay is taking a hit from my emotions while I'm playing. At least not when I'm, you know, doing any kind of serious attempt. It does depend a bit on the game though. Some games are more susceptible to... Here I'm playing it safe again. I'm not gonna end that ninja with a throw. I've decided to punch the ninja off screen because the ninja will kill me in one hit, and ninjas are ninjas, so let's play it safe. Anyway, yeah. I didn't really get nervous playing this game, or I don't really get nervous playing most games. You can use your available time left to score on this boss. In theory, I've tried it with save states. It is practically impossible to get anything sizable from that. So again, probably best to save that for Tassus. Level 8, this is the final level, and this level is a bit unfinished feeling to me. It probably is a bit unfinished, because I heard that the production of this game, you know, there's a lot of stuff that was never put into the game, like there's stages and backgrounds that you don't see, and there was more planned for this game, but they didn't have time to make it. That's just what I've heard, so if someone actually knows the full story of that, you could tell me more about it maybe, or correct me if I'm wrong. And when you get to this stage, you really do feel like, okay, this stage isn't finished. They didn't fully design this level. It doesn't feel like a final level, so that's another flaw in this game. So what I'm doing now is, I know how much time I can spend before I spawn the Onibabas coming up, and then I know how much time I can spend before I spawn the mid-boss. And the mid-boss is a little bit random with how much time it will take. It's not entirely consistent, so it's best to leave yourself a little bit of extra time just in case you get bad luck with how long the mid-boss will take. That's why you will see me have a bit of wasted time during the mid-boss, a bit of time that could have been used on these Onibabas, for example, to get a bit more froze. That's just because the mid-boss is a bit random with how long it takes, and I didn't want to take any chances with that here. You can use that kind of wall there. After I did this run back last year, I still did some more runs, and I was also with save states. I was looking, after I did this run, I was looking throughout the whole game for strategy improvements. I just fine-combed through the entire game, trying to find every single part of the game where double throws could be done theoretically, first of all. And I was a bit disappointed to find how few spots you could actually double throw enemies in. But on this level you can do double throws that I didn't do in this run, for example. You can do it. And other ways to improve score, like doing things quicker and being able to do more throws, and just fastest way to handle different enemy groups at different points. And yeah, I didn't continue scoring with this game because while I did find some strategy improvements, I felt that I didn't find enough to go for the world record. I felt that I found enough that a world record would be feasible with extremely good luck and extremely good play, but not good enough to beat with extremely good play, but, you know, not amazing luck. I just didn't really find myself capable of that, so I decided, okay, I've had my fun now. I played this game for like a month or two, scoring this game, and just decided, okay, that's it. I've had my fun. It was starting to get a little tedious because, I mean, I think this is a solid game for score, but at the end of the day, you're doing the same thing over and over. We're just comboing the enemies and then throwing them sometimes, and, you know, doing various things and hoping for good luck in the process. I think it just felt like it was time to stop after a while and move on, do something else. And I think the run I ended up getting was, while far from perfect, there are some strats that are missing. Ones that are not even, a couple of ones that are not even necessarily that hard to do, and lots of strats you could do if you're playing very, very risky that I wasn't doing. And probably if you're doing almost everything that's theoretically possible, not just like, not task only strats, you're doing like everything, and almost everything goes pretty much perfect, there is like another 100,000 points in the game, I think. Something like that. Maybe slightly more even. I was making save states, and I can't remember exactly how much I was getting, but yeah, I would say another 100,000 points is feasible if you play extremely well, and then the rest will come down to luck. Here's at the end of the game, we have the second easiest enemy in the game being repeated over and over at the end of the game. I don't know what sense that makes. Usually in a beat 'em up at the end of the game before the final boss, the game would, you know, save some of the hardest stuff. Like final fight, you get the hardest fucking screen in the whole game that is extremely hard to no miss with starting with full health even. It's just insane. It's right before the final boss. Lots of games save really fucking hard shit for the end, and why wouldn't they? You would expect that, but no, this game is like, just put tennis guys who have tennis rackets, a couple of them, and then the final boss. And then here's the final boss. You just walk up to her, infinite her, and the game is over. And, you know, that's it. Now, if you don't infinite the final boss, she's total bullshit. Complete ass. We even finish with the Super Joy move, because that does more damage than a punch. I mean, that gives you more score than a punch. But you can't grab and throw the final boss, because then we would do that for 1,000 points instead of the 300. Alright, there you go, that's Sailor Moon. And we got over 2 million, 2.045. My second best score before this one got 2.015. but that run had another bonus crystal, so this run actually scored better by 60,000 points compared to that run, which is a lot. If I want to go for 2.1 million without relying heavily on luck, I believe it should just barely be possible for me to do so. Just barely. But man, that would be like getting the same luck I did here and going for 2.1 million would be extremely difficult. It's a lot more likely I would get over 2.1 million because I get a free bonus crystals or even 4 bonus crystals all of a sudden. You know, just great luck. So Sailor Moon, I think the game is not without its flaws. I think the flaws mostly involves the bosses and kind of the somewhat anticlimactic end of the game and end of the last stage. But other than that, this is a very intense, very well designed and satisfying beat 'em up with great graphics too. And I didn't even mention how it's a licensed game. It's Sailor Moon. I never watched Sailor Moon, so I don't know much about Sailor Moon. But what I do know is that, from what I can tell, the graphics in this game are spot on for Sailor Moon. And I think if you're a Sailor Moon fan, you should probably find it very delightful to be, you know, controlling one of the, well, Sailor, well, I don't know what you call them, sailor magical girls, controlling one of them and just enjoying the concept. I think that the game's single player is perhaps the most satisfying for me, single player beat 'em up. But again, it's not perfect. I'm not saying it is. But the scoring system has been one of the most entertaining to me. I like the idea of having such difficult enemies in the game, but at the same time telling you, okay, you need to fight them one by one. It's just so anti beat 'em up. It's just such a interesting challenge because, you know, you're playing this game for survival. It will look completely different. You'll be grouping the enemies because it's much easier to do that, and instead of having to deal with lots of different enemies, you will just kind of group them and keep lots of them stunned and send lots of them to the ground with throws and air attacks all at once, which just makes everything so much simpler and easier. So if you find this game very challenging already, I mean, you need to start somewhere and go for a clear first. But if you really enjoy the game, if you really enjoy clearing the game, scoring, this is a great beat 'em up to start scoring in. I've seen what scoring is like, and I even tried scoring in some other beat 'em ups, and usually it's kinda shit. Not gonna lie, usually it's kinda shit. This game works great because you're scoring against the timer, and you're scoring against the enemy groups, having to ungroup them to the opposite of what you're supposed to do. If you want to try other characters, they kind of play very similarly. They have some subtle advantages and disadvantages, but like, you kind of need some experience to start to tell like how the characters differ from each other. You could use any of them if you want to. And I really think this game is underrated quality-wise. Very underrated. It gets way more shit than it deserves. It is a licensed game, and I know licensed games are often overrated, not underrated, overrated, because, you know, it's a licensed game, so of course people will be extra interested in them. Like Konami beat 'em ups, you know, they've done X-Men, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Simpsons, and Buckyo Hare, I think, and Asterix, and all kinds of shit. Konami, and these Konami beat 'em ups are kind of terrible. They're actually kind of terrible. So I think licensed beat 'em ups kind of they're gonna get a bad rep because of fucking honestly, just because of Konami or whoever else may have made these bad licensed beat 'em ups, you know, I don't know. But a lot of those beat 'em ups are actually considered quite good by a lot of people, and I do chalk that up to, okay, like, people are enjoying these because these beat 'em ups have characters and worlds they like. Like, they like the graphics because they like X-Men. They like seeing the X-Men in a beat 'em up. I understand that. Or they like seeing the Simpsons characters in a beat 'em up. And, you know, I like seeing the Simpsons characters in a beat 'em up too. I actually don't really mind. I actually kind of like the Simpsons, for example, because it does give you an attractive looking Simpsons world, and while the game is very basic and really jank and just there isn't a lot to it, there isn't really anything inherently wrong with playing such a simple game either. It's a Simpsons beat 'em up. You can clear that in an afternoon and move on with your life, and maybe the process of doing so was fun. For me, it was pretty fun, for example, to play The Simpsons. But I would never say that those games are on a gameplay, design, mechanical level anywhere near as good as quality like Capcom beat 'em ups and other great beat 'em ups like this one. And that's why I'm a little confused why this game isn't held in higher regard, because it is a licensed game. I know Sailor Moon is very popular and very beloved, and this game offers a great challenge. It gives you all the tools you need to overcome that challenge, and it's very engaging to play with how aggressive the enemies are and all that. And it looks good in the process. I don't really like, other than how the game is very kind of hard to get into. If you're not good at beat 'em ups, you don't understand beat 'em up fundamentals, this game won't make any sense to you. But other, like, if you do like beat 'em ups, I don't see any reason why like this game wouldn't be fun for you. Personally. On the other hand, the difficulty is extremely overrated, and I don't really understand why that is. Because yes, I can understand the game being extremely difficult if you don't play beat 'em ups. Of course it will be. The game doesn't fucking make sense if you don't play beat 'em ups. It won't make any sense. You won't understand how strong you really are if you don't understand how to, you know, the fundamentals behind beat 'em ups. This game's kind of like Final Fight. It has those kinds of mechanics. It's kind of like Final Fight. If you've played Final Fight before, you will start this game and it will almost immediately start making sense to you. Trust me. That's why I think that when I came back to this game after having played in Olympics, we played like Punisher and Cadillacs, and then another Olympics we played Final Fight. I ended up not clearing any of those, but I played them long enough to be like, okay, I'm starting to kind of get the hang of how beat 'em ups work now. You know, I put like, maybe during Olympics, you know, maybe I put like 10 hours into Final Fight, 5 or 10 hours, getting up to the stage 5. It was starting to make sense to me as I was playing, and when I then came to start playing this again, it just started making sense right away. And when this game does make sense, you still need to make sense of some things like the bosses. The bosses are really stupid. Once you do all of these things, I just don't see it. I don't see what makes this game unapproachable. So it's time we unstigmatize this game. It's time we look at this game for what it really is and say it's an awesome game. It's a great challenge. It's hard, but not insanely hard. I mean, there are way harder games than this out there. And like, give it a chance. It's really fun how aggressive these enemies are. That was the first thing that grabbed me about this game. Is I was moving around, playing my beat 'em up, and the enemies would they would swoop in and out and be super dangerous and randomly evasive and then randomly aggressive and just very tricky to deal with. And compare that with most other beat 'em ups where the enemies are a lot easier to control on the surface. And this just seemed amazing to me. I was just having so much fun right away. Kind of reminds me, on the shmup side, reminds me a little bit of Gunsmoke. In Gunsmoke, the enemies are very unique in the shmup world. They just kind of randomly move around all over the place, and if you let them get the better of you, they'll be in very, very inconvenient places. They'll start running in behind you and stuff. And they're just super fun to deal with. I always loved Gunsmoke because the enemies are just super entertaining to deal with. You know, usually in shmups, enemies are a lot more scripted. They, you know, they show up, they move in a specific way, or they just kind of slowly scroll down the screen. And yeah, things just kind of make sense just by watching them. But in Gunsmoke, the enemies show up on the screen and then they just start running around all over the place and you don't know what the fuck they're gonna do. That's kind of how it feels at first to play against the enemies in this game. And I mean, I love that. I really, really, really love that. And that's also why, like, in the long run, this game might not be... in the long run, you will undo all of that in this game. Because you'll learn, like, when the enemies are gonna spawn. So you don't maybe have to scroll them all on screen at once. You learn how to group them. You learn how they work. You learn how to fight them individually for score even. You can even learn that. You can learn everything. And when you do that, the enemies will not thrill you nearly as much as they did at first. And when you do a skillful run like this, you'll just be like, yep, I've done what I wanted to do. I've had my fun with Sailor Moon. I can still put on Sailor Moon every once in a while if I feel like it, and kick ass if I want to, but the game is never gonna be what it used to be anymore. It's never gonna be that crazy game anymore. And when that happens, what are you gonna do? Well, you're gonna find the next crazy thing, and you're gonna master that, and you'll have fun again, right? So, there you go. I hope you enjoyed the run. I hope you enjoyed my commentary, and play some fucking Sailor Moon. It's a fantastic game.